the schus of our learning should be a panacea, and also for Shlema or Phil Nassim and Sarah. Samach Hey. We're at 65D. We're in the middle of the page. Ella Amar Abzera. We left off with the question. Let's go back over what happened. We quoted a Mishnah in Shkalim. Mishnah said that if the person loses the Shkalim, the person that was taking the Shkalim to Yerushalayim, if he loses them, then it depended on if the Shkalim were already, the Truma Salishka was already done, if they were already started to use them, if the people need to give again, or if they don't need to give again. There was a discussion about that. Okay. Then we said, what happens if they find the Shkalim? The ones that were lost, the Ganav returned the Shkalim. So we said it was a machlekes. If they can work for the following year. Now you have two shkalim, they have two sets of shkalim. They have to give again. So then they found the old one. So can it work for the following year? So Rabbi Yehuda says yes. So Rabba says, what's the explanation for Rabbi Yehuda? Because he holds that obligations that are from this year can be brought the following year. Obligation, shkalim is an obligation. You can, this year's dedications could be used for next year's. Abaya says, 1 second, I have a problem with that. Because we have a discussion about if the animals of Yom Kippur, Parvasar of Yom Kippur, get lost, you designate other ones. What do you do with the first ones if you find them? They either put to death or you wait till they get a mum. 1 second. Rava, you just said that according to Rabbi Yehuda, you can use them for the following year. Why are you putting something to death that could be reused? That could not be reused, but that still has use in the following year, according to Rava's explanation of Rabbi Yehuda, that obligation offering could be used. So Rava responds to Abaya, and he says, no, those are community sacrifices. Community sacrifices need to be used from the new shkalim, have to be brought from the new shkalim. And so therefore, I can't use last year's purchases of the sacrifice of Yom Kippur for this year. So 1 second. That's only the community sacrifice of the goat. But the par, which is the Kohen Gadol sacrifice, it's considered a private sacrifice. That's supposed to be bought from his own money. So why can't that be saved from last year? They said, oh, it's a gzeira. And so we had a problem with that gzeira. It's a decree. You're going to use this one, you might use that one also. So we said we had a problem with that. First of all, we're not going to put something to death, the animal to death, just because it's a decree, you might make a mistake. And second of all, even if you do make the mistake, it's not such a serious mistake, because although you're supposed to purchase the animals with this year's funds, but if you use the last year's funds, it's also acceptable. So it's not even a real problem. So the whole thing isn't a real problem. Okay. I don't know if it has to do with intention. It has to do with the purchase of the animals for the sacrifices come from the donation of the people. So in other words, it represents the people. How does it represent it go? Everyone contributed. So everyone's contributions this year go for this year's sacrifices. Everyone gets to contribute again next year, and it will go for next year's sacrifice. But if they happen to have used last year's money for this year's sacrifices, it's also acceptable. Okay, so that's what we're discussing here. An animal that was lost and then found, can you use it for next year's sacrifices? We said that it gets put to death, or you wait till it gets a month. 1 second, it should be eligible according to this. Okay, so this is where we're holding. Ela Amar Reb Zera. It's right in the middle of the page. Rather, Reb Zera says, a very interesting teretz. He says, we did a lottery last year, right? We lost the goats. but we had already decided which goat is Lazazel, gets pushed off the cliff, and which goat is going to be a sacrifice. So that was decided already. So the problem is that we lost them. We got new ones. Then we find them. Problem is that the lottery from last year is not effective for this year. So it doesn't seem like a very big problem. A lottery. So Nasi Vinagral, make another lottery. That's not a big deal. Just we'll do it again. If it didn't determine, so we'll decide again. Right? You pick the thing out, and whichever is on the right is. No, we can't make another lottery because you may think, you may make a gzera that if we're going to be allow you to use last year's karbanos and make a new lottery, you might one time do it without a new lottery. It says, well, you're only answering the goats that require a lottery. And par ma'yikalamema. So what about the bull, which is brought, the Kohen Gadol brings this bull for himself and his family? There's no lottery there. It says, well, gezerah para tisar. It's a decree. We're going to allow you to bring last year's bull. You may bring last year's goats. You may end up bringing them without a lottery. So this is a decree. Because of this decree, they're going to put the animals to death. So Amru Rabbanu Kameda Abaya. The students said in front of Abaya, gezerah mishum chata shemesa bala. If you're going to wait a year for the sacrifice to be brought, it's possible that in a year, the owner of the sacrifice could die. Maybe the kohen is going to die. Now we switched the question. We didn't think the kohen was going to die before, whatever. At the beginning of Yoma, we had this discussion. Do we think that the wife of the kohen is going to die? That was from Yehuda's opinion. And Sage said, no, we don't suspect that. Maybe that's just one day, but over a year, it's a bigger time. So there's more to suspect. The Gemara has other questions, so it doesn't really pick on this point. It says, who owns the sacrifice? You're worried about, you see, there's a problem. If the sin offering is brought, it needs to be brought with the owner alive. Otherwise, the owner received atonement by his own death. That's an atonement. His death is an atonement. So you don't need to bring a sin offering after the owner dies. So here, the kohen is going to pass away. Kohen Gadol will pass away during the year. And then you're going to bring the sacrifice from last year that was lost and then found. So maybe he died. So that's only an issue by the bull. But by the goat, that's a community sacrifice. That's for the people. The community doesn't die. Individuals die. Right? That's how it works. That the community is always there. So that's not a problem to bring a community sacrifice with. Let's one of the individuals of that community passed away. The community is still a community. The Gemara says, well, that would be a decree. Decree of the goat, because you might end up bringing the bull. Mishum Gzeri Musa, because of such a decree, we're going to put the animals to death. Ela Gzeri, we need a new answer. Ela Gzeri Mishum Chata Shavar Shanasa. Okay. Ian, you said this yesterday, or 2 days ago. He said, what about the age? What about the age of the animal? Yeah, I said I wasn't sure about it. You and the Gemara. So, what about the answer to the question? Turns out that there's an issue with the age of the animal. Yeah. So the Gemara says it's a decree because the age of the animal is going to be an issue. You can't use last year's animal because the age is not good. The Gemara is a little surprised about the way this question is worded. Gezerah, it's a decree. It's not a decree. It is. The decree is when there may be a problem. And in order to avoid a possible problem, we'll make a decree. Even though right here there's no problem, but this could lead to a problem. So, but that's not what we're discussing. Here we're talking about if it's last year's animal, then it's this year, it's a year old. How is it possible to be, right? After Pesach, they tell the kids, keep the house clean. Pesach has been less than a year. But if it was dedicated before Yom Kippur last year, so by this Yom Kippur, it's got to be a year old. So, holy cow, the Gemara says it's not a question. Why is it not a question? You okay with this?
Great.
Okay. Holy kasha. Listen, I was straight to the computer screen. Around 65. Towards the bottom. Holy kasha. This is not a question. Why? Kirebi. We're going to follow the opinion of Rebbe. Listen to this. The Tanya was taught in a brisa, Shana Tamima, when someone sells a property in Israel during the time of the Yovel, so it wasn't a real sale, it was a lease. It was a sale, but it was only for 50 years. Yovel is the Jubilee. Every 50 years, everything starts over in Israel. So the economics is all like resets. Everything goes back. So the default. So all the property goes back. There's an exception though. Houses in walled cities could be sold if they're not purchased back within the first year. So they have 12 months basically. Or someone that sells a property in a house in a walled city. If a year goes by, that's a final sale. It leaves the inheritance. That's an exception. So it says Shana Tamima. They has 1 year to purchase it back. What's a year? 365 days, like the Sanya, like the Asolia. Divrei Rebbe, that's Rebbe's opinion. The Chachamim say no, that's not a year. You count 12 months. 12 months is a year. Now 12 months is 11 days shorter because the months would be the lunar months. Yeah, the solar months don't really have significance. We just made them up. But the lunar month is a real month because it actually has a physical significance. So 12 months is 11 days short of 354 days. If you follow Rebbe's view, then it's possible that we dedicated an animal last Yom Kippur, and this Yom Kippur, it's not a year yet, because it was 354 days, and not 365 days. Now, the truth is that the dedication was supposed to be after the animal is 8 days old. So you're cutting it very close to, Rashi says it comes out to 364 days old because you dedicated it last year, Erev Yom Kippur. This year, that's an extra day, and it was 8 days already. It comes out to like very close, but it's still possible that it's not a year yet. It's not his birthday. So what happens if you follow the Chachamim, though? Then it adds in 1 point. If it's a leap year, you add an extra month. Then you get an extra 30 days there, or 29 days actually. Then that's to the seller's advantage. He has an extra month to purchase it back, redeem it from the sale. So, okay, what did we resolve here? We resolved the wording of the phrase that the Gemara used, that there's a decree that it could be over a year, so that's why we put the animal to death. And we asked, why is it a decree? It is over a year. We said, well, it's not necessarily over a year. It could be that it's under a year, but there's a decree that it could be over a year. Because of that, it could be a day off. Okay. That's only good with the goat, which that's supposed to be under a year old. A par is already in its 3rd year. Plus. So that, if it's still around, it's still eligible. It doesn't have a cutoff date, how old it is. It only has a start date.
So do we now have the answer to how old?
Yeah.
It could be up to 1 year.
Up to 1 year. Up to 1 year.
Who's the
They had all from the very beginning of Jewish history. We were into calculation. We were combining we were setting leap years every 3 years that make up for the 11-day discrepancy. We had an extra 30 days every 3 years, and then we would adjust it. That's it. We should always have the seasons and the calendar the same. Yeah, it would be 33, but we would add a 29 day. Then it would be every few times we would add every 2 years to make up 7 out of 19. I'm sorry, the Sanhedrin was doing that. Yeah. Okay. What about the bull? The bull could be already 3 years old. The Gemara says Gzeira Paratasar. So now we have a decree. If we're going to allow you to use the Sa'ir, what is that? Yeah, both. Okay. So if we allow you to use the bull, you may end up using the goat. Some Gzeira Yamas, we're going to put it to death because someone may make a mistake. We're going to put the animals to death. And the truth is, you know what? It doesn't get put to death anyway. Everyone agrees that a sacrifice that reached its age limit doesn't get put to death. It just grazes until it gets a moon. Very interesting expression. It says that you view the animal as if it's in a cemetery, and therefore the kayan can't have access to it. So, which means you just set it aside, and it doesn't get. You just let it graze until it gets a mum. It just isn't offered. So, what's this whole discussion before that you have an animal that gets lost and then found? Some say you put it to death. Some say you let it get a mum. No one says you put an animal that's too old to death. The whole issue here was it may become too old for the following year. So, and if it gets too old for the following year, so you let it graze also. So even if that problem is going to be there, you still don't make the decree greater than what the actual problem was going to be, and that was just going to be you let it graze. Rather, Rava says there's a different issue. They may come to a mistake. The Tanya was taught in the Brisa. The Tanya says, "Ein makdishin ve'marichin ve'machrim b'zman hazeh." Don't make anything consecrated. Don't dedicate anyone's value. Another type of dedicating value nowadays. Don't say learning all of these things about the Beis Hamikdash and all of this. Don't dedicate anything to the Beis Hamikdash nowadays. There's a problem. And if a person does, then because we don't have the way of resolving what this dedication, we don't have anything to do with it. So behema tiyake. We're going to see what that means, but basically it has to be put to, if it's an animal, it has to be put to death. Peiros ksos kalim yerkabu. If it's fruits or garments or utensils, you have to let them rot. If it's money or metal, you have to put the value, any benefit that you could get from it in the Dead Sea or the salt water. Yeah, maybe the Dead Sea. Vezo ikar. What does it mean that an animal you let it die? It says Nayel Delas Lefanavi Mesa Mela. You just lock the door, you let it die. Sounds like you starve it. Yeah, you don't want it to hang around because it's consecrated. Yeah. It's got to be an easier way of letting it die than starving it. That doesn't sound like it sounds cruel. Isn't it in the parsha that thirst was the worst? That was worse than something else. Yeah. You're not supposed to consecrate it. Yeah. Because we don't want anyone to make use of it. Personal use. Something that was consecrated. Okay. Takala demai. So what was your concern over here? We're bringing this up because we have a concern that someone may do something wrong with this animal. Itakala dakrava. What are you worried about? You have an animal here that was for last year's Yom Kippur. You lost it, you found it. Now it's sitting around. We're worried about something. What are you worried about? Maybe someone's going to offer it as a sacrifice. Says, well, I feel a kol is nami. I have a lot of halachas in Kachim about animals that need to be left to graze. When you look at those Gemaras over there, it's a lot of interesting cases. And a lot of the times we said, well, you let it graze and let it get a mum. We didn't say that you put it to death. We weren't worried that your mistake is going to happen. You said, let it get a mum. What's a mum? A blemish. You let it get a cut on something, and then I say, okay, not eligible for a sacrifice. We sell it in the for people their meat. They eat it, and so everything is good. There's no waste there. Here, you're putting it to death, and because of what? Because we're worried that you may end up bringing it as a karban, and it was really dedicated for a different karban. But all the time we have halachas about animals that we weren't concerned about that. So ita kala de giza devavaida may be concerned you might shear the wool, you may work it in the field. It says, well, I feel kovias nami. Well, I have a whole, mesechtas about what to do with these animals, and we never said asuta. We never said that in Aramaic, asuta is to help. Asya is a doctor. We never said that this was an issue. The Gemara says, "Leim takala dakrava." The truth is, over here we do have this issue. Someone may bring it as a sacrifice. Why? V'hanach the labnei akravaninu leitarid bu. Hach the bas akravu tarid bu. All those animals were not eligible to be sacrifices, so you let them get the mum, and then that was it. This animal is actually still eligible to be a sacrifice. Right? It was under the year old, it was 1 day under. You actually could bring it. The whole year you're worried about, let me get this over with, because it's still going to be brought as a sacrifice. You may end up bringing it actually as a sacrifice. However, it says, in other words, what we just answered was that there's a difference between the sacrifices of Yom Kippur and all those other sacrifices that you let it get a month. By those other sacrifices, let it get a mum, that animal was not going to be brought as a sacrifice ever. The animal of Yom Kippur is going to be brought as a sacrifice. You just have to wait till Yom Kippur. So there's a difference over there in this, in the way this animal is viewed by the person that's taking care of it. But the kalatzma tanai, this concern is actually a machlekes tanaim. The Tanya chada, one brayso is taught. Pesach zeikarav rishni yikarav b'sheni yikarav l'shana haba. The carbon Pesach that wasn't brought. Why wasn't it brought? I don't know. Everyone joined another party, another group. So, well, you can sell it to someone that was tamei on the first Pesach. He needs to bring a sacrifice for the second Pesach. He brings it, and it's good. B'sheni, let's say it wasn't brought on the second Pesach. So you can bring it the following year. It needs to be within its first year. That's a problem. Well, we'll follow the Rebbe or whatever. 365. Right? B'tan Yidach, we have another brayso that says Lo Yakrav. You can't bring it at a later date. My love, but the kol pligi, it must be that this machlekes has to do, these two braysos, it's a machlekes, has to do with, are we concerned that a mistake will happen? If we let the animal hang around, that's still eligible to be a sacrifice. You may bring it for something else, or Gemara says light. That's not the issue. Everyone holds that we don't suspect to a mistake. I have a better teretz. You know what this machlekes is? If you let it hang around, that's a machlekes if it's going to be a year old by the following Pesach. It depends which opinion. If I say that the year old means you follow the solar calendar, 365 days, it's going to still be within its first year. If I say I follow the lunar calendar, the 12 months, then it's going to be a year old. And that's the machlekes. Can I let it stick around? It's a great explanation. The Gemara says, but there's a brisa that says don't bring it, the animal, and the same applies to if there was money dedicated, but you don't use that money either. Now, money doesn't get old. It's not considered a year old. The animal could be a year old. Money is not. It doesn't have that sort of data. What is it? Inflation. Ella lav shmamina, but the color plague. We go back to our first explanation that there is a machlekes in the brisa, if we're worried about a mistake happening. Shmamina, we see. Okay. Start a new Mishnah. Okay, that was a long discussion, just explaining an opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that was talking about shkalim. That were lost and then found. According to him, you're allowed to bring them the next year. How do we explain the lost animals for Yom Kippur? Why you can't bring them the next year? That was this whole. Okay. You sell it out. No, that was a different case. There were cases where it had to starve. What case was that where it said that was someone dedicated an animal nowadays? That was the. Okay, we're up to a new Mishnah. Talking about the service of Yom Kippur, right? We had all of the sprinkling of the blood inside, the bull and the goat, and on the mizbeach apnimi, right? Now he comes to the goat. The Kohen Gadol comes to the goat that's being sent to Azazel. So he puts his two hands on the top of it, and he confesses. And this is what he would say, right? Ana Hashem, please God. Chatu avu pashul lefanecha amcha beis Yisrael. There's different versions of what is based on the Gemara before, what the correct way of listing those sort of sins were. Because the chatoim were done by mistake. The other ones were done on purpose or rebellious. We have sinned before you, Amcha Beis Yisrael, your nation, the Jewish people. It doesn't say Kayanim over here. It just says your nation, the Jewish people. Ana Hashem, please God, Kaperna, forgive. Lachatayim v'lavinus v'lachshem shechatu v'sha'ava v'shafashal l'fanech Amcha Beis Yisrael. Forgive the sins, different types of sins, transgressions or whatever that we've sinned before you, the Jewish people. Kakasav v'seres Moshe Avdecha, written in the Torah of Moshe, your servant, saying, Lema, that on this day it was an atonement to cleanse you from all your sins. In front of God you will be cleansed. Right? At this point, the Kayanim that are standing in the courtyard, when they would hear the name of God being pronounced, was coming out from the mouth of the Kohen Gadol. They would kneel and they would bow. They would fall on their faces, and they would say, blessed is the name of the glory of his kingdom forever. Yeah. Who wrote the Seder Avodah that we say? Must have been the Gainim. I don't know. We have like the Avodah in the middle of Musaf and Kippur. We have basically all of this is like crunched into that in Sechtas Yomos in there. Okay.
If we learn that you start from the first Jewish for the community on the part.
Yeah. It was also discussed.
Was it the same Musa?
as we say in as here. There's one thing, there's a difference here. Because this, over there he said, Aniyu Basi.
The second one.
Oh, the second video. Oh, I don't know. I don't remember.
This is the second.
No, you brought that out, that it was two videos on the same part.
Right.
What? That was for the Kayanim.
The second was for.
No. First one was for himself.
The second was for
Kayanim. Yeah. Okay. Now that was the viday. Now Masal Misha Malicha, they passed it on to the person that was going to take it. Akol Kshem Layalicha. Everyone is kosher to take it. You could use, anyone can do this. Just it's more than a mailman because he has to push it off the cliff. He has to get it there and then push it up. Akol Kshem Layalicha. Elisha Asu Kayanim Gedolim. Kayanim. You take out the word Gedolim. Keva, they made a rule. They didn't allow Yisrael to take it. Amar Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says, Ma'isa v'yilichu Arsala. There was a person Arsala that took it. Mitzi Pairi. They add in the word. The Yisrael Haya. He wasn't a Kayan. Rabbi Yossi was after the Churban. He must have had a tradition for this. The Churban wasn't in the days of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He was the teacher of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shua. They were teachers of Rabbi Akiva. He was a teacher of Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi wasn't there. Okay. They made a ramp. They wanted him to hurry. They had sins. They wanted, let's get rid of this quickly. So they would hurry him up. So they would pinch him. But here it says they would pull his hair. I have an easier solution than making a ramp. I think they would yank him. So they made a ramp so that he could get out of their way quickly. He could get over the walls and just get right out. An easier solution would have been to him to take a zero haircut and to build a ramp. But I don't know why this was. Sounds like a big job. It went over the walls of the Azara.
We learned before the Kohen Gadol has to stand on the top of the steps so that they can see the Sarah Mr. Way into the point.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Oh, yeah?
And, we would try, it was discussing how high the walls were.
No, I thought that was about the Paraduma. That when it was on the opposite mountain, you had to be able to sprinkle the blood opposite the walls of the. I don't know if you would see that. Yeah, the reconstructing of the ramps was for the Paraduma, right? This week's parsha doesn't say it in the Rashi's. Not as a sacrifice, but they're allowed to eat meat. No, not once there's a temple. Yeah. This is a special case. I know we don't have anything like this. In Yiddish also. He wasn't a Kohen. Or he could have been a Kohen, but didn't have to be a Kohen. Right. That was, right. Avram Nosson is asking now, why don't you send two people along with this person to protect him, or to, on the side bodyguards?
Not to protect you, to help them look around.
Yeah. No, the ramp was created to get him out of everyone's out of the way. If you want to get him out of
Where did the Kohen go?
in Nazareth. This was in Nazareth, yeah. The video was in Nazareth.
Now you have all the steps.
He's passed all the steps.
Past the steps.
Going down.
Take all the
Oh yeah.
steps leading into the
Well, he's in the center. He's in Nazareth somewhere.
Azara.
Because there's the courtyard of the temple.
Yeah.
Oh, now you're saying with that, I'm saying why they had the people. I thought it was more over there was more honorable. Okay, it says V'ila b'nei Aranam kadishecha lekamar. He doesn't say that this is also atonement for the b'nei Aaron. He just says this is atonement for the Jewish people. Montana, who would this go according to? Rabbi Yirmiyah like Rabbi Yehuda. This doesn't follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Dik Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Yeshlem Kapar B'Sar Mishtaleach. Rabbi Yehuda says that the Kayanim also get an atonement by the Sar Mishtaleach. And he doesn't mention Kayanim. Amar Abaya says, appeal to him, Rabbi Yehuda. It's not necessarily not like Rabbi Yehuda. At the Kayanim lav b'chlal am Yisrael nenu. He says the Jewish people. That's Kayanim also, right? But they're also the Jewish people. I know he didn't mention them specifically, but so what? Right? They're still counted. So even according to Rabbi Yehuda that says that the Kayanim get an atonement from the Sar Mishtaleach, this is fine. They gave it to the person that was going to take it. Tanar Rabbanan. It says, V'shilach biyad ish iti hamidbarer. It was sent with the ish iti. Ish, when it says in the pasuk ish, lahachshir sazar, that means that it could even be a non-Kohen. Iti, when it says iti means shumazumim, that he was designated. Iti means time, but it means he was designated. That it had to be designated before. V'afilu b'Shabbos, iti afilu b'Shabbos. They would send them even on Shabbos. Now the Gemara is going to need to explain what's the problem of taking a walk on Shabbos with an animal. Iti afilu b'tumah. Iti even b'tumah. See, I have a pasuk that's telling me that it's allowed. The Gemara goes back to explain. Ish lahachshas azar. When we said ish, we're saying that it doesn't have to be a Kohen. Moshe, you traveling? Yeah. Pshita, of course, the Zar can do it. The Gemara was surprised that it needed to tell me that you can use a Zar. I need a pasuk to tell me I can use a Zar. It's just taking the animal somewhere. Yes, the Zar means a non-Kohen. It says, well, it says that it's an atonement. Maybe I would think that if it's an atonement, it needs to be by a Kohen. It says, no, it doesn't need to be a Kohen. Iti, when it says that it's designated, afilu b'Shabbos, even on Shabbos, l'may hilchasa, what are you coming to correct? Like what malacha would have been done that we say that this is something that's performed on Shabbos? Amar Rav Sheshes says, Leimar, shema yachela markiva yal ksefa. You see, the fact that he pushes it off the cliff on Shabbos, that he's killing the animal. I don't think the Gemara is questioning that we know is done on Shabbos. We're saying, how do we know that this walk is done on Shabbos? It says eating. What's the issue of walking on Shabbos? So it says, Amar of Sheshes, maybe he has to carry it. Let's say the animal wasn't feeling well. They put it on his shoulders. What about Tchum? I mean, there is a limitation on walking. Rashi says that's only rabbinic. It's machlekes Bava and Yerushalmi, actually. According to the Yerushalmi, we probably wouldn't have this discussion because the Yerushalmi says that Tchumen is deraisa, and I think the Rambam passes like that. But in the Bavli, Tchumen is derabana. It's only rabbinic. How far you can walk on Shabbat. So what's going to be the issue? The issue is that he's going to carry it possibly if the animal isn't feeling well. It's a young goat. It's first year. Come on, like whom does this go? The like Reb Nosson, it can't go like Reb Nosson. Reb Nosson says to carry a living being is not a prohibition on Shabbos anyway. It's rabbinic, but the pasuk isn't going to tell me that I'm allowed to do a rabbinic. Something that's forbidden. Pasuk would tell me that although it's biblically forbidden, but this is an exception. The pasuk doesn't have to tell me that the rabbis are going to come later on and don't worry about it in this case, right? So afilu tamer Reb Nosson. Really, it could be with Reb Nosson because cholashani. What does it mean that a living being carries itself? It's not considered carrying on Shabbos because it makes itself lighter. It feels lighter. But however, if it's ill, so then it doesn't make itself lighter. And you're carrying, it doesn't assist in the carrying. So that would be actually carrying, even according to Reb Nosson. Amar Rafram. Rafram says, they say Meres, we had a pasuk here that's telling me that you can carry this animal on Shabbos. So this tells me Erev Vayitza l'Shabbos mean Erev Vayitza Yom Kippurim. That you only needed a pasuk to tell me that you're allowed to carry this animal if it's ill on Shabbos. What about Yom Kippur? It is Yom Kippur. But if Yom Kippur is exactly like Shabbos, then why don't you tell me that you do it on Yom Kippur? Right? Well, we're talking about walking the goat to the cliff. Well, it depends. Here we're talking about the sacrifice that's what? What was our issue? That you may end up carrying it. We said you can do this even on Shabbos. Why don't we say you can do this even on Yom Kippur? If Yom Kippur has the same laws, carrying laws as Shabbos, it's the same story. Rafam says it must be that Yom Kippur doesn't have the carrying laws. Now, Tosfos here mentions that the Gemara in Krisa says that this statement of Rafam is Bedusa. It's entirely rejected. It said Bedusa is like it's a lie. It's incorrect. For animals and sacrifices that are performed in the temple, you can definitely break Shabbos. Here we're saying that you can do it even for this sacrifice, which is brought outside the temple. When it says that, that it's designated, even if he's impure. What's the problem if he's impure? He's not in the temple. If the fellow that's tummy needs to get the animal, he has to go into the Azara to get it. He's going to go inside even if he's tummy. Okay, Shalos Rabbi Eliezer. The Gemara at the end of this is going to tell us these questions. These are called Shilas of Rabbi Eliezer. Several questions over here. Rabbi Eliezer is Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenes. He's a student of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He has a tremendous memory. He never forgot anything. However, he's very careful. The Mishnah tells us, he was a cemented system that doesn't lose a drop, right? So, but at the same time, he never said anything that he didn't hear from his teachers. So they're going to be asking him questions which he didn't hear from his teachers, and he's going to avoid the answer. If the animal was sick, can the person carry it on his shoulders? It wasn't sick. It could carry me and you. If the person that's bringing it gets ill, can he give it to someone else to take? Should go in peace. We don't have to. We're not doing it. What's your question? They used to say, like, when you get there, call me collect. It's like There's no such thing anymore as a collective coin. Dachvo v'lay mace. They asked him another question. What happens if you pushed him? The guy pushed the goat off, but it didn't die. Does he have to climb down the cliff and like hit it or something? So should all the enemies of God, reach their end. And so of course it's going to die. The Chacham say, he was avoiding the question. The sages say if it's ill, you could carry it on the shoulders. If the sender, the one that's bringing it, the messenger gets ill, you could send it with someone else. If it didn't die, you should go down and kill it. You didn't notice the parachute on him. Hit a bush, right? Shalos Rabbi Lezer, they asked Rabbi Lezer, so-and-so, does he have the world to come? The Ga'inim add in that it's referring to a specific person, either Avshalom, which was David's son, or maybe it was Shlomo HaMelech. Amalei, Leishal Tuni, Ela Al Pliny. How do you have that? How does that say it? How do they answer that? Are you asking me about so-and-so? I think that's how it is. Can a shepherd save the sheep from a lion? You're only asking me about the sheep. Which means what about himself? What about saving the shepherd from the lion? You're only asking me about the shepherd. Yeah. What is this referring to? Either, you look at the Tosfos, either they were asking about Avshalom. Avshalom lived with his father's concubines. Does he get the world to come? Possibly, there's another pshat. Maybe it was Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo HaMelech, the pasuk tells us that he built places for idol worship, where he allowed his wives to. And it's a question over there. The Gemara says that you shouldn't say that Shlomo sinned. What about saving from a lion? This is referring to Bathsheba was taken from Uriah. So Nasan Navi comes in and gives him a parable. He says that there's a poor man that has one sheep, and the rich man takes the sheep. So this is a question about what David did. Should you save the sheep from the lion? Who would the lion be? Could you save Uriah from David's hand? Was Uriah considered married to Malchus? Okay. Now he has another question. He's avoiding all the answers. He's avoiding answers. Okay. Mamzer Maliyabim. Is a mamzer, does he inherit from his father? What about doing yibum? If his brother passed away without children, does he end up marrying his sister to have a child on his brother's namesake? The mamzer. No, she's not a mamzer. Only this one was a mamzer. The brother wasn't. So officially, he's not supposed to marry anyone. So, mal lasidus beisa, mal lasidus kivri. Can you put plaster on his house? So he says, can you put plaster on his grave? In other words, he's not asking. I'm sorry, we're not talking about the mamzer. Are we allowed to put plaster on the house because of the churban? He says, are we allowed to put? We shouldn't paint the house because it should look. Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. Our houses should also look perfect. So you're only asking me about the house. What about the grave? So the Gemara says, it's not because he was like, how's that translated? Like teasing them or something, or taunting them. It was because he didn't want to say anything that he didn't hear from his teachers. He only would answer things that he heard directly from his teacher. Okay, let's leave it. That is question.
Okay, thank you.